In this lesson, we'll begin sculpting our terrain. Alright, so I went ahead and took care of the rest of the corners. Now the key here is to make sure that everything is on the right layer. So let's go ahead and do that together. So click on your building, it should be building form A. Click on this area, terrain, terrain. Every element should be on its own layer. Again, the key and the reason for this is to improve the performance as we begin adding elements onto this. And it's good to just have it there so in case we need to hide any elements within our model, we can, and we have better visibility. Last but not least, this element should actually be on its own layer, and this one should be on my walkways and parking. So we're in good shape. So I'm going to jump to layer 0. Real quick, let's jump to our terrain layer. That's what we'll be working on here. So now what I want to do is, if you remember from previous lessons, it's going to be really important that we have all of our surfaces facing in the right direction, otherwise stuff won't show up. So you can see most of our surfaces are showing the white, some of them are showing the darker colors here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on these elements, highlight everything, right click, and I'm going to say reverse faces, and it'll make everything show up nicely. So same thing here, double click it, highlight, right click, reverse faces. I think we're good there, and I think we may need to do the same thing here for our streets here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that, highlight everything, right click, and I'm going to go ahead and say reverse faces here as well. So that should leave us with a nice model that's covered in this white, so then all of our faces should be visible within our model. So now we're ready to start working with our terrain. So the first thing we can do, and which will probably be pretty helpful, is we can go ahead and apply a color to this terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my paint bucket, and we can go under vegetation. Just go to your drop down and let's look for some vegetation, and I'm going to go with this vegetation grass 1 here, and double click it, grab our paint bucket, and I'm just going to click on all of our elements here. 1, I could start to see what's getting modeled where. With 2, it's just starting to make a lot more sense to me, and things are working out a little more logically for me now that I know the difference between my grass and my concrete. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my concrete while we're here as well. So we'll go ahead and paint bucket again. This time go to your drop down and let's look for asphalt and concrete, and I want to go with this one here. So we go ahead and paint our areas there. So that takes care of that. So we're looking pretty good so far. So now what we need to do is we need to start thinking about our terrain and what's going where. So we know, if I flip back around this way here, try to get grounded here, kind of going back to referencing our model here. I'm going to go back to Google Earth real quick and kind of use that as my reference. So we'll have our building placed here, but you can see most of our larger space is going to be blocked off here because we have some existing things we have to work around. So this side here will actually be where we have our small mounds and our water feature. So we'll keep that in mind as we're modeling. And it's just going to be a nice small water feature for people to kind of sit around and read and kind of get out for the day, and also improve the site and make it look good. So we'll go back here to there and we'll think about that. And that's one of the reasons why I put the more detailed and smaller grid on this side, because you have a little bit more control, and once we add more details to these grids, it'll create a much smoother looking surface than if we use these larger grid pattern here. So for the most part, this one will have some hills, but not a lot. This is where we'll actually have most of the hills and stuff for our area. So what we can do now is I can come in here and we could double click on our surface. And now, a wonderful tool that we have is going to be in our sandbox toolkit. If you don't have it up here and you can't see it up here, you can simply go to Tools, Sandbox, and go to Smooth. We're going to use this Smooth tool. And what this does, it's going to allow us to create the mounds that we want to create for the side of our site. But the only thing we really need to do is define the radius. So right now we're set up at about a 30-foot radius, and you can see how big that is going to be. So we want to decrease that just a little bit. So I can come down here and I can change that radius from 30. We could say maybe we want it to be a 10-foot radius. So I should be able to move this over, and it should affect it. And if it didn't, just 10 feet, enter. There it goes. You can definitely see it affected it. So I'm going to make sure I can start kind of pushing and pulling these areas up, being mindful of where I put that center point on my circle. I kind of want to follow this same grid line here, but I don't want to go too high as well either. You can tell how high we're going by the distance down here, so we're just going to move up just a little bit. Keeping in mind this mound is just kind of in place just around the perimeter of our water feature, and we're also going to be smoothing in a downward position to create the depth for our water here shortly as well. So I'm just going to move this around. Pretty simple. So it's all about smoothing our surface. So you can see we might have a little bit of a crease, but that's not a problem. I'll show you a way around that a little bit. But I do want to finish wrapping around this first area. So you can see it's just like sculpting. It's actually pretty fun, and I really enjoy working with the smooth tool and these terrain tools, making these really complicated surfaces to really add a sense of realism to our models here. So we'll kind of finish this off, bring it right on around. Now we'll go on to the other side. You can actually work a lot faster. I'm just trying to be extremely careful, maybe too careful. There we go. I gotta remember, I don't want it to be as organic, so I don't want to be too planned out on how I'm pulling this surface. So again, we'll kind of follow the curve of this building. And again, I'm being mindful of where I'm placing that center point, because that center point, as I'm sculpting this, is actually the point that moves at a much quicker rate than the other points. You can tell the center is the largest yellow square, and as we move out closer to the edge of that circle, those points move at a much smaller rate vertically, or than we do for doing it from the middle here. So the middle moves faster. Just that's what you want to keep in mind as you're sculpting this surface. It'll help make things make a little bit more sense. So we want to keep a little bit of room for trees as well. So I think we're looking pretty good so far. Alright, so this takes care of the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and move in one more, move my center line. Originally we kind of followed this one. I'm going to move to the next line in and do it ever so often to try to avoid that unorganic look in a way, to kind of give it a simple way to explain it here. I want it to look natural and a bit random. Not completely random, just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, going one line over and just pulling up in. So we can actually sculpt this out here. So now that we have the banks taken care of here, just about done, we can apply our water. But we'll do that after we actually push this in now. So we could probably keep the same radius. It seems like it's a pretty good radius. Now we're going to do this inward. Actually, let's increase our radius. So we'll say a 20-foot enter radius. So that should increase that. And now I can start to pull this down. And I'm going to stay towards the middle as much as I can. So this will actually help us get our water in place here. And it will actually help us define the bottom surface of this hole for the body of our water. Again, I don't want it to be too perfect looking. I'm trying to go for a pretty natural, organic look if I can. So I don't have like a specific distance. It's kind of sculpting in a way here. Again, this is all conceptual at this point. So now I have that taken care of. So I'll kind of click out so you can see what we have. So you can actually see our shadows and our contours and or the actual surface of this stuff, and it's actually starting to make sense. So we'll kind of finish off the rest of our terrain here, where we'll add some water. I'll show you a cool, interesting way that we can add water to our body of water. And then we'll also maybe add some additional surface features here to each one of our corners, as well as this side. So in the next lesson, we'll finish using the smooth tool to create our terrain.